Okay, so it gives me great pleasure, Sonia, to speak to you here in Cobh GAA Club, and I'm sure everybody else is as honoured as I am to be in your presence, to think of all of the achievements that you've had around the world, and we have you right here in our little club, so thank you for that. So the first thing I'll say to you is that, you know, you are a world gold medalist champion, an Olympic silver medalist. You won the World Championship cross country twice. You held a world record. You're a world record holder for 23 years. But have you ever considered, or did you ever regret not playing for the Junior B Camogie team?
I did. It probably didn't exist in that kind of level when I was growing up. I only ever remember camogie in Cobh Vocational School. So when I used to run laps around the field, often saw the girls training, and sometimes I thought that did look a bit more fun than running laps by yourself. And a couple of times I did join in. But, I was pretty fast and I could kick the ball a bit, but I wasn't very good at picking it up and running and getting all the kind of coordination and technical skills together. So, and I also used to turn up with shin guards on because I was afraid my life was going to get injured.
Girls in Cobh Camogie never kick your shins. Well, you mentioned at the GAA conference, you used the phrase coaches' messages that came to you later on, long after you had heard them originally. Is that what you mean?
Well, I suppose your coach will always say things to you, and you will, reflect on that. Particularly, if you're questioning anything or you're wondering, am I doing the right thing? If you don't get a good result, the coach. So Sean, he would always say to me, "Well, you get out what you put in." So that always stuck to me because I felt like, well, if you train hard, then you'll be able to race to the level that you've trained for. And there's a famous book about the Kenyan athletes: train hard, win easy. So if you train hard, then the racing is easy. And it was always like that, because it's a bit like training and playing a game. Like, the game is the fun part, and that's when if you're fit and fast and you've done all the work, then when you go out to play a game, then you're looking forward to it because it's a game. And to me, running a race was a game when I was fit and ready, and you just had to come up with these tactics and enjoy it, and you follow people and you don't let them get away, and you track them, and you annoy them, and then you eventually sprint past them. But so it's a game.
So easy. So what do you understand by a late developer?
Well, I suppose the thing is, age is one of these numbers that people look at when they look at athletes, and you're supposed to fit a certain category when you're a certain age. And some people are better when they're younger, and some people are better when they're older. Some people are good when they're young, and then they kind of don't go so well, and then they come back again. So it's all about forgetting about the age, and not worrying about that. That if you want to do something, it doesn't matter what age you are when you do it. I have a friend in Australia, and she's Irish. She's from Mayo, and she runs the marathon, and she's 42 years old. But she's run faster than anyone in Ireland has run since Katrina McKiernan, which was 20 years ago, more, 25 years ago. But people look at her as she's 42, and they say, well, how can she do that? Well, she didn't really start running until she was 33, so it was only 10 years ago. So it's like she's 34, because she had 10 years where she was just running around, and she wasn't beating her body up and running a lot of miles. So now she's capable of it. And you often see it with people who start running later in life, and they continue, they never knew it when they were younger, so they run PBs, and they're a bit more springy because they haven't worn out all their muscles and joints like somebody who's been running and training since they were 17 years old. So, I think if you want to do something, you'll do it, when the time is right. And, I think it's one of those things that you can't write someone off just because they're not playing good when they're 21 or 22, if they have a little bit of a lull in what they're doing, because, you know, maybe they're doing more work in college, or they might be doing a job and taking more time, so they don't have the time to commit. But then eventually they kind of feel like, oh, I'd like to go back and do that again. And so it becomes a personal thing. And I suppose anyone who, what you consider a late developer, somebody who comes good at a later age, tends to surprise people because they don't expect it, because it doesn't fit in with the normal sense of, you know, athletes developing from, you know, under 18, under 20 into senior level, and in the gradual progression. They probably have a bit of a down and then go back up again. And sometimes they're better when they're older, more developed, because they're more mature. And so they're not as emotional about how they do things, and they appreciate things more as well. I think when you're given a second chance at something, or you realise the second time round that you can be pretty good at this again, that I think you appreciate it a bit more. And so you're a bit more relaxed and not so intense with what you're doing, and you're not in a rush to be successful, because you just feel like it's a bonus, I think, that you've got this chance again.
And you yourself, like, at the age of 17, this is a different trajectory again. At the age of 17, you won the All-Ireland Cross-Country Championships. At 17, you were the top in the country. And yes, you said that it was 8 years before you reached your full potential, you know, so you were kind of starting here, it seemed, and then going that way. And would you say that, you know, there's people, we say, who are never on minor teams, like Bill Cooper, Daniel Carney, Seamus Hannity, are good examples of people who maybe weren't at minor but then reached the upper levels. So your trajectory, top of the country at 17, and we would have all said, wow, full potential. But you're saying, no, full potential came 8 years later, the World Championships.
Yeah, I suppose it was about 8 years later, but, you know, there's always kind of indications along the way, or there's little clues that, you know, you do one or two good things, but you're not consistently good because you just don't have that kind of fitness base. And as much as you can win a race or run a fast time, and you might see it in a player who plays a great game and then they play about 5 bad games because they're just not fit enough, you know. So you're talented and you've got the skills and the ability to do something, but there's a general fitness that you need to have to be able to be consistently good. And, you know, that's how I was over those years, is that I was a good athlete, I could win races, but I couldn't consistently win races because I just wasn't strong enough and I hadn't done enough training. And, you know, you can be out there training 5 or 6 days a week, but when you're looking at, like, competing against the best athletes in the world, you need to be out there 7 days a week, training twice a day, and, you know, to going to the gym and looking after your diet and sleep and everything else. And all these things, you add them on as the years go on. Because if you did them all when you were 17 or 18, then you'd have nothing to add on as you get older. So there has to be always one more thing that you can do, at least, to be better next year than you were last year. And so you keep doing that. So then when you add all those progressions on top of each other, then you eventually can back things up. And so I had a little thing here. And so when I was 17, national senior track champion, 18, 19, 20, I had a whole bunch of injuries, and I was in college in America. I ran a few races, I won a few races, I lost a lot of races, but then I eventually kind of worked it out. So it took me a while to work things out. And then once I worked it out, then I was a lot more consistent in what I was doing. And then, so when I was 21, I got to the European final. So that was, you know, one huge stepping stone up from what I had done before that. 22 world student champion, and 23 fourth in the Olympics. So that was kind of the 6 years later, fourth in the Olympics, and that was the biggest thing for me to, I suppose, give me the sign that I belonged in those races and that I could compete. And then all of a sudden your sense of belief increases so much that, you know, you believe that you can do anything then. And you just...
Well, we thought you were great all the way along, so looking from afar. So, how difficult do you think it is for young, and we have a lot of teenagers here this evening, to find the right life balance between, sporting ambitions and recreation, and at that particular age, then the culture that they can be very easily drawn into at that age, like alcohol or other things. What sort of a message would you give, I suppose, to encourage teenagers to look at that balance? And is it true, or would be an advocate to say that, being lured into those things, even though you may not have reached your whole potential, could scupper, a potential career? How would you say to talk to them about balance?
Well, I think you have to decide what's the most important thing to you, and then that will outweigh everything else. And it doesn't mean that you have to be focused and concentrated on that 24 hours a day, 365 days of the year. But you have to go through blocks of serious training. So I think it's very difficult to do more than 6 to 8 weeks of intense training and focusing on your diet and, really like zoning in on something and, not being distracted by anything else. So you have to go for those blocks of training, and then you have to have a little bit of a downtime. And, you have to go mad sometimes, and you have to let loose and, find out what goes on, down the pub or in the disco or wherever you go. Like, you have to find these things out, because it's a bit like saying, I'm not going to eat chocolate anymore now. So you're beating yourself up because you really want to have some chocolate, but you're stopping yourself. So, you're stopping yourself from going out with your friends and, finding out what's going on. And most of the time, if playing sport is the most important thing to you, when you go out there and see what's going on the other side or in the dark hours, you enjoy it for a short time. But then you realise that they don't go hand in hand and they don't work well together. And, if you really want to be the best that you can be in sport, then you have to find the right balance. And then it becomes a bit like the, 5 and 2 diet. You have 5 good days and 2 kind of free days, but maybe not as regular as that. It might be, I've got my training, got a big match coming up, but then I'm going out and I'm going to have a bit of fun. Then I'm going to start again on Monday and be good again. And you just have to create these little rules in your own head. And I think you need to be strict to a point, but not totally regimented. And I think you have to be human, and you can't be a robot and block yourself off from everything and totally put yourself in a box, because then it's no fun. And sport is supposed to be fun, and you're supposed to enjoy it. And when you have success, then you should enjoy it and be able to go out there and share that with your friends who they probably missed you while you've been out there training hard. If they're not involved as well. And the thing is, you need your friends for life, and you only have your sport for short time.
Yeah. So if you had, in that respect or in that regard, if you had a magic wand and you were able to go back as an adult and speak to your 17-year-old self, what would you be saying about transitioning from a juvenile athlete to adult? What would you say to 17-year-old Sonia?
I think the thing that would stand out for me would be to take your time and not try and rush things. So see, when I was 17, I ran at the Cork City Sports and I won, and I ran 9:01, and the qualifying time for the Olympics in '88 was 9:03.
Oh.
And not very many people know that, but if we had social media and everything, it would have been mad, I would have been on the Olympic team and everything. But in the following year, I had a few injuries and ran nowhere near as fast. So I did manage to run one race in 9:13. But, when I was injured and I didn't feel like I was the same athlete I was in 1987, I didn't even consider the Olympics. I kind of thought, well, I'm not good enough, so, I can't be going anyway. But then when I was in college in America, there was a girl on our team, and she ran at the Olympics for America. And one night we all gathered around the television and we watched her running in the race, and she finished in 6th place, and she ran a time that was, so fast it was inconceivable that someone in college would do that. And then she came back and she had one more year of college left, and she came and ran with the team. So we used to go training with her, and she was just a normal person. So then you see that and you think, one day I'm going to be able to do that. Mm-hmm. And so I think, at the time the belief for me was always there, but there was always a bit of rushing and trying too hard. So if I had an injury, I was always in a rush to get back. And I didn't always get to the bottom of, why the injury happened. It was just going to get better and then get back to training straight away. So I think you have to, I suppose, take your time, and I also would maybe appreciated some of the success that I had a bit more, rather than always looking for the next thing and the next thing. And, as much as I suppose that probably helped me to be great at some things and to run fast times, there was definitely certain times where I could have, taken it a little bit easy and enjoyed it a little bit more.
So that'll be your advice then, take your time and enjoy the moment. Yeah, probably good advice. What about overtraining versus undertraining? That seems to be a struggle in a lot of people. Am I doing too much? Am I doing too little?
I think in some ways, like I remember when I was training when I was young, and you'd often hear people referring to people and say, "Oh, they're overtraining," and it's a big generalization. That, like, I think someone is overtraining if you can't figure out why they're not going so well. They're not playing well because they're overtraining. But what's overtraining? It's a bit of an anomaly, that thing, I think, because what's enough training? Sometimes you have to train more and sometimes you have to train less. But there's no definitive overtraining, I don't think. There's definitely undertraining, but sometimes that's good as well, because when you have young athletes, they shouldn't be training too much. And I see it often in young athletes in athletics, and you can tell the ones who train a lot more because they look more like professional athletes, the way they warm up and they do their drills and their strides, and they're just much more neat. And so you can tell when someone has trained a lot because they're much more fluid in their running and their style. But they've done it too early, because it's a bit like that whole thing about, well, if you do everything now, then what do you do when you're older? And then they get bored with it as well, because it's just it's all consuming and everything is measured and intense. And I think when you're a young athlete, it shouldn't be. It should be more focus on, you warm up together and you have fun and you enjoy it and you chat and there's a bit of banter going around. And then there's a bit of serious stuff in here where you're going to really work on something. And then the warm down is the same thing. It's back to so it becomes more of a social thing than, we're trying to make you, the next best thing.
Mm-hmm. So the jury's still out on what exactly overtraining might be, but there's definitely undertraining can be defined or seen.
Yeah, and I think and it's not a bad thing, undertraining.
Yeah.
And that's where, if someone is really playing really well and you can see their skills and their talent and everything looks good, but you think they could be stronger. And that's the big thing with team sports, is that the body shape changes so much when you see players like even when Roy Keane went from Cobh to Nottingham Forest, within a year he was like so much stronger and fitter, just looked like a totally different athlete, because probably focused a bit more on gym and strength work and things that you don't do when you're a young athlete. So there just needs to be that room for improvement, and and I suppose then there has to be the mindset and the ability to do that, and the desire to do that as well, because some athletes can be quite happy at that under training level, and you kind of have to, there comes a point when you have to move out of the comfort zone, and because it's quite nice to just jog around and have the chat and be social, but then sometimes you do have to put your head down and work hard. And we always say that you get out of the comfort zone and you push yourself beyond
the level that you're currently at.
So we're looking for bits of advice off you now. What would you say, what advice would you give, about nutrition, hydration, and stuff like that, the importance in the pursuit of excellence?
Well, nutrition is very important, and I suppose, when I was growing up, we were given and you didn't complain, but it was just plain normal basic food. Now I think there's just so much choice out there, and so much like foods that I would never have known when I was growing up. And you go to the supermarket and you can buy 2 for 1, and everything is bigger and better and in lots of packages. And so I think the more natural food that you can eat, the better, and the higher nutritional value of food, the better. So if you've got to eat so much after training, but you've got to choose the better foods to eat, and the more, like, I suppose, fruits and vegetables and proper meals that you eat, better. Like, even I know when I go riding the bike, or you see people in triathlons and they have a lot of drinks and gels and things like that, and I think they're okay for short term, but not all the time. I think if you talk to most people, they will tell you that real food is so much better than packaged stuff, and you just have to weigh up what you're going to eat. And there's no harm having a treat or something that you really enjoy, but you're not sure it's good for you, every now and then, because you just get it out of your system. And I think the more healthy that you eat, and the more you train, the less you're likely to eat food that's not so nutritious, like burgers and chips and things like that. They just don't, I don't know, you don't tend to gravitate towards that as much as you would when you're not training hard. Often, if you're training hard, you don't really feel that hungry straight away afterwards. And so that's a good thing as well, that you're then you wait until you crave the foods that are healthy foods, and and in that regard, then you have to be prepared. And if you're going to be hanging around after training, then you should bring stuff with you, so that when you do get hungry, then you eat the right foods, and
so all the good stuff that's unpackaged,
all the good stuff,
5 a day and all of that.
Yes, but with the hydration, I think hydration is quite amusing, really, because there's an obsession with hydration. Like, I'm often trying to remember when was the first time when I had a drink bottle that I carried around with me, because it wasn't for a long time. Like, nowadays everybody has a drink bottle, and you can't be without a drink bottle, at school, at training. And I do it myself, like when Sophie, my daughter's going to training, I say, have you got your drink? And it's like there's a panic that what would you do if you don't have a drink? And we never really drank. I mean, with water and cordial was the I suppose the magic hydration, way back when. And now there's just so many drinks out there, things like Gatorade and all this kind of stuff. There's so much sugar in them that they can't be good for you. I think you're better off getting the powder and make stuff up yourself if you're going to go down that route. Or even make up a drink yourself. I started doing one myself recently, and it's amazing. It's got everything. So I just get a squeeze of lemon, and then put a teaspoon of salt and a bit of salt into water, and some maple syrup, and it's really strange. It's the strangest taste you can imagine, because it's nothing like a normal drink that you would buy in the shop, but you get used to it, and it's actually really
you're going to have us all go down now tonight.
You might still have a real salt.
I believe here, yeah.
And the thing is, because I know I used to drink a lot of water when I was younger, and the thing is, water is not very good on its own. It's good in normal day-to-day stuff, but if you're in hot weather like we had last summer, then you need to get the salts and a little bit of sugar into you as well, just to keep the water inside you. Otherwise, it just keeps running through you, and then you're draining yourself of all the salts and minerals as well.
Yeah, I met 2 people recently in Cobh, and they were waiting for tour, and they had bottles, that you could see. It was kind of pink, awful and stuff. And I said, "What are you drinking?" And they were two medical doctors, both of them. And they said, "This is water with electrolytes." And they're saying exactly what you're saying. They said water on its own just goes through your body and out again, but this will help retain it. So it's those sort of electrolytes or the urolite or whatever it is we call it. So that's what you're saying. That's better.
The other thing with food, I think, it's the same with training, is that if you have a little, a lot is much better than a lot, a little. And in food wise, I think people sometimes they try to eliminate certain groups of foods, and as soon as you do that, then you're going to be missing something. So I think a little bit of everything is good, and just to keep the balance right. And I often think that if you're training hard, that you need to eat more, but if your normal day-to-day activity is not very active, then you don't need to eat more. You just need to eat normal. When I was growing up, when I first went to England for training, I didn't have a car, so I used to walk everywhere. So I had all this extra normal energy, on top of training. So then you can eat a lot. But if you don't have that normal active energy, then you just have to eat normally. So to keep the balance right.
And you've mentioned it a good few times this evening, and despite, mental preparation, despite nutrition, hydration, all of those things, you do get injured sometimes. What would your advice to be about injury recovery?
Well, I think before you focus on the recovery, I think you have to determine the cause of the injury. Because if you just focus on the recovery, then as soon as you get back and you haven't fixed the cause, then there's every chance that you'll get re-injured again. So it's a bit like when if you're out for a bike ride and you get a puncture, and all of a sudden it becomes like Formula 1. You got to change the tube as quick as you can, and you forget to check the inside of the tire. And then you go 100 meters down the road and you got another puncture. So it's a bit like that, in that you have to work out, well, why did I get injured in the first place? What caused that? Because if you just go back to doing the same thing all over again, wearing the same shoes, or doing the same exercises the wrong way, then you're likely to get injured again. So you really have to figure out the cause. And then to help with the recovery, oftentimes you can't do what you most like to do. So, which is generally to run around and to be on your feet, and sometimes you have to do alternative exercises. And I used to be devastated if I couldn't run, because the easiest thing to do is put your shoes on and run out the door. Now all of a sudden I've got to go to the swimming pool or to the gym, and it takes you twice as long to get there, and you can only go at certain times, and there's all these things that make it more difficult. But you have to kind of accept it eventually. So you can have 2 days of beating yourself up and being annoyed and eating chocolate and ice cream and all the things you shouldn't be doing, even though you're injured and you can't run, so you shouldn't be eating them anyway. But you do all these mad stuff, and then you say, right, what can I do? And I couldn't always do that myself, but I would have someone tell me. I had a physio that I trusted, and he was in Limerick, so I wouldn't always see him straight away. But eventually I would call him up and I would tell him what was going on. And, it took for me to call him and for him to tell me what I could do to then start all over again. And to accept that, okay, you've got to go to the pool for 6 weeks and you can't run for 6 weeks, and then you can gradually go on the bike, and you just make a little plan to help to pass the time and to maintain fitness. So you train 3 times as hard when you're injured as when you're not injured, and then you get back out there and you start playing again, and you feel like you haven't trained at all because you're totally out of sync with what you're supposed to be doing, and your rhythm is off and everything. So it takes 2 weeks to get back there again. But when you do get back, if you hadn't been doing all that maintenance work, then it would probably take you another 6 weeks to get back. So you just have to do the extra stuff instead of your normal training. it's for your mental state as well as your physical state to kind of keep you busy and keep you active, and oftentimes I would try and replicate a running session in the swimming pool or on the bike, and by doing that then you felt like you were kind of on a bit of a plan to doing what you want to do.
Mm-hmm. So now, as a parent and a coach and an athlete yourself, what's your opinion on different coaching styles that you've come across?
Well, I think you have to respect all the different coaching styles, and you won't always agree with them all. But you have to kind of, I suppose you can't just jump in and say that's wrong, because with coaching is one of these skills that there's many ways of coaching and doing things. There's no one way to win the Olympics or to create a team that's going to win a county championship. There's no one way of doing that, and if you talk to 10 different people, they could possibly have 10 different ways of doing it. So I think you have to, as a parent, I think you have to have trust and respect for the coach as much as the athlete has to have trust and respect for the coach. And you have to let them do their job. And as much as you want to interfere and get involved, sometimes
you have to hold yourself back.
You just have to I suppose not get too involved. Yeah. And like I oftentimes, if I go to where Sophie is training, I just go and take the dog for a walk, and I don't even know what's going on. And then I would say to her, "What did you do for training?" And she'd go, "Oh, a bit of this, a bit of that," and no detail.
Yeah.
But you just trust that when you run the race on the weekend, it'll all be okay. And the thing is, it's not for me to. Why should I have a say in it anyway? It's a bit of fun to watch it sometimes and to see what's going on. I think also that as a coach, you can feel under pressure when parents are watching you. You can tell you get a vibe. That they're like people are watching you and analysing you. And at one point, I was coaching some young kids, and when they were really young, they were like under 10s, and I used to just try and play all these games and do relays and different things, and there was no real kind of purpose to the training. There were no proper structured formal sessions. They were just, I was just keeping them active and doing little games and things. But I always felt that the parents wanted the kids to do more. And I just had to believe in what I was doing. And if the kids didn't want to train, then that was fine. They could go somewhere else. But I always told them that, no, I don't think kids this age should train that hard. And, we would go and see other coaches training much harder. And you wouldn't agree with it, but you can't stop it either, because that's their belief, and that's you have to let people do what they think is right to do.
So there's a noted expression there: hard work beats talent, and talent does not work hard. So what's your own perspective on talent versus ambition?
Well, I suppose talent is a bit like the mental and physical measure. Talent is one of those very subjective things that it's very hard to measure it, and it's hard to change it. It's what you are, and it's what you've got. Some talent is very obvious. You can see someone out in the field there, and you just think they've got all the moves, and they just do things naturally. And other people's talent could be hidden, and it might not come out until they're in a competition, and then all of a sudden they do things that you've never seen them do in training before, because all of a sudden they've all their inhibitions are gone, and they just let loose, and they're in the moment. So that's probably the best type of talent, is the one that you can't see, because they also train hard as well. But I think if you tell someone they're talented, you shouldn't really tell them that too often, because then they start to believe it, and they think they won't have to do any training. Then you just go out there and play. So I think everybody has to work hard. It doesn't matter how talented you are. You have to work hard, and if you didn't work hard, then everybody would be out there doing it. And that's the big difference in people who are successful at sport is that they work hard, and they find the balance of, you know, working hard and then also being ready for a competition, because sometimes you find people can train really hard and there's no difference when they play a game or run a race at the same level. And then you have other people who, they just train away and they consistently train, but it's just normal, there's nothing special. And then they go out and they play a game or run a race, and all of a sudden they're like, you know, 10 or 20% better than you've ever seen on the training field. And that's the best way an athlete can be. And I don't know if this is something that you can create, or if you can, you know, stop someone who's training too hard, that then they'll be better in the game. That's a bit of a catch-22 thing there, what you do with that, because, you know, some people, they have to train harder than they would play. And if that's how they get the best results, then you have to let them do that. And I suppose you have to see that and realize that. And that's why when you have a team sport and you have, you know, 12 or 15 people out there running around, how do you balance a training session for everyone when they all have different kind of strengths and weaknesses? And, you know, that's a very difficult thing to do when you're not just focused on one person.
Yes, indeed. Okay, well, I think everybody would join me in saying what a wonderful, insightful, informative, educational evening that we've had with Sonia this evening. World champion, Olympian, mother, coach. We want to thank you so much for your honesty, your integrity, and for the wide range of issues that you've given us food for thought. And I'd like us all to thank Sonia very much by showing our appreciation. Not only have we had a wonderful evening from Sonia, which we appreciate, she's going to be around for a little while, and we'll be happy to take some coaching questions, you know, when we finish up right here.
So I have just a couple of things. Just Great. You know, sometimes you want to go in, you hope that someone remembers something you said. So I've got a couple of things easy things to remember, and I suppose there's 3 words that I think, you know, if you get these 3 words down and then you work out what to do with them, then, so one is decide. So you have to decide what you want to do. You have to decide what your goal is, and this can be, you know, a seasonal goal. It can be, you know, a 10-year plan, but then you break it down. But you have to decide your goal, and then once you've decided that, then you have to commit to it. And when you commit to it, then that involves your training and your lifestyle. And by committing, the best way to commit to something is to tell someone what you're going to do. Because as soon as you tell them, then you're accountable to them. And, you know, that doesn't necessarily have to be your coach, but, you know, it can be your family, your friends, because they all want to know how you're getting on with your goal that you're chasing after. And then once you decide, commit, and then, you know, the results that you get it's your success. Is the results that you get, and what that is or how that measures up is, I suppose, depends on how committed you've been to the goal that you set. And, you know, when you've got a big game coming up, you know, the only thing that you can really control is your preparation for that game. And, you know, you can't control how the opposition are going to be when they turn up, but what you can control is how you handle the opposition and how you deal with what you're faced with. And, you know, that's kind of 2 little things.
So with those golden nuggets of wisdom,